For the pledge, please. Would you call the roll, please? Here.
Dr. Harrington.
Here.
Ms. Newman.
Here.
Dr. Taub.
Here.
Dr. Klotz. Ms. Schulman.
Here.
Mr. Rubin.
Here.
Mr. Land.
Thank you. Next item is agenda approval. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I would like to take note that when Anya Eliason presents the October and November financials, she also wants to update the board on the build-out arrangement for a new tenant and see if the board has any feedback on the plan for starting that build-out.
Building update, excuse me, with the October, November financials. Thank you. Are there any other changes to the agenda at this time? I do note that in our presentation on recovery, that Crystal Mosby will be joined by LaRon rather than Stacy. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Or seconded by Ms. Newman. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Our next item is public comment. Mr. Cummins?
Working? It's on? Okay. I'm Fred Cummins, President of Alliance for Mentally Ill of Oakland County. This is my wife, Hope. She hasn't been here for about the last 4.5 years. She's been taking care of our daughter 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She's now here because, as you can see from this sheet, our daughter has died. Recent victim of the mental health system. Many times we thought she might improve. Before this, we hoped to get her in an intensive rehab program to recover. She's no longer going to recover. I encourage you to read this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on public comment. But you will be hearing more about it in the future, because this is a long story, and there are a lot of problems along the way, only a few of which are mentioned in this. So thank you.
Fred, I sincerely know how you're feeling at this time. It hasn't been that long for me either, and it is with my full heart that I convey our sympathy and hope that this good memories will prevail. Thank you. For anyone else who would like to make public comment at this time? Next item is the approval of the consent agenda for board minutes, committee of the whole minutes, Citizens Advisory Committee, Rights Advisory Committee, and the Oversight Policy Board minutes. Is there a motion to approve and accept those items?
So move.
Ms. Newman made the motion. Is there a second? Dr. Arrington. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item on our agenda is the recovery presentation, substance use disorder.
Evening. My name is Crystal Mosby, and I'm the manager of substance use and prevention services here. This evening, we decided to have a recovery presentation. Mr. LaRon Coleman, he is actually a member of our oversight policy board, so we're very glad to have him here. He has an associate's degree as well as a bachelor's degree from Wayne State, and he's presently pursuing his master's degree, and we'll have that in the fall. So we wanted to make sure that he came and he could present his journey as at the present. He's a recovery coach at Turning Point, and so I think it'll be good to see his journey on how he got to where he is. Mr. Coleman.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is LaRon Coleman, and I'm, as she said, I'm a recovery coach over at Turning Point Recovery Centers. I also serve on the Oversight Policy Board here in Oakland County. Speaking about Oakland County, to me, is when I think of Oakland County and the services that it provides, I think of it as a county of hope. And the reason I think of it as a county of hope, I originally am from Detroit, Michigan. And I traveled to and from all the different sides of Detroit, being one to never really be one to cross 8 Mile, as we used to be told back in the day. I'm grateful that I did cross 8 Mile, because when I crossed 8 Mile, I was able to make it to the city where I still live at today, Pontiac. And Pontiac was known as a recovery hub at the time I got here. There was different places that you could seek recovery at. Turning Point was still around. Also, you had the Fox Center that offered services as well as solutions to recovery was there, and also you had. I'm trying to think of all the different various places. It was so many to name, but I was grateful that those places existed. Grace Centers of Hope was a place that existed as well. And I was able to be at all these places and to receive different things that they offered. And so I was able to gain recovery here in Oakland County. And not only did I start to gain recovery here in Oakland County, I started to gain an education here in Oakland County. I went and got my associates at Oakland Community College for mental health and social work. And the reason why I was interested in that is because I wanted to give back to this county and the people that were here that I got to know over the years of being here. Also, pursuing a higher education, I went on to Oakland University for my bachelor's in social work. And still I rise, I still want to gain a higher education. And so, not being able to get a higher degree as a master's in social work in Oakland University as of yet, they are developing that program. So I went to Wayne. And still I serve here in my community. I serve here in Oakland County. This is where I live. This is where I receive my help. This is where I want to help those in need. And not just in Oakland, but all around wherever I go. But I never want to forget, this is where I received it at, here in Oakland County. I'm grateful for Oakland County. I'm grateful to be able to do my, I'm doing a internship over at Easter Seals now. and getting to learn about the mental health aspect as a part of the substance use disorder as well, because they co-occurring, they run together, and I'm grateful to be able to gain that education as well. I'm grateful for Oakland County, and I'm grateful for this board. I'm grateful to be able to serve in this board. I'm grateful to be able to serve in this county. I think this county has a lot to offer. It offered me something that I didn't have. It offered me hope. And so, without a whole lot more to say, I'm just glad to be here. I'm glad to be able to share that with you. I'm glad that you're here. And I hope that you stay here, because there's a whole lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Grateful for you. And we're grateful that you're so generous with your experience and your gift to help others. It's such an important opportunity that you took very seriously and were able to make a difference for others. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. But we do thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions for Mr. Coleman?
Yes,
I just want to, again, show my appreciation. I know I attended the Oversight Board, and you're on that board, and your board is doing good work. So we thank you for volunteering your time and energy and efforts to that work as well.
You're welcome, ma'am.
I don't think we can hear too many of these stories. It's really such a inspiring opportunity for us too. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Next item is the presentation on mental health court.
Evening, everyone. As you know, Liz Bauer had presented a while back a public comment piece around the mental health court at the 45th District, and there was a request by the board to have our partners come and share their very important work in the 45th District. So I am going to turn it over to them and let them take it from here.
Thank you, Kathy. First, introduce myself. I'm David Gubo. I'm the judge that's kind of oversees the mental health treatment court at the 45th District Court. And I'm going to introduce the folks with me in just a moment. But first, I just want to thank Kathy and really all of OCHN. OCHN played a really critical role in us getting established as a treatment court. I think we were working together before you even became OCHN. And we had to redo a lot of things when you changed your name. So we've had a long history. So I thank you, Kathy, and others from OCHN in helping us to get established. You were part of our original citizens group. And if I may digress for a moment, also part of our citizens group were people from AMI, Oakland County, and I guess on behalf of our entire treatment court, extend our condolences to Fred and Hope. Fred has been with us from the beginning as well as part of us getting established. So we extend our condolences to them and also thank him and others from their organization, as well as many other organizations in helping us to get started. So let me begin this evening with really telling you who we are. We are the only mental health treatment court in Oakland County as it relates to the district court system. There are some things going on at the circuit court, but we're the only district court mental health treatment court in the county. Joining me here on my extreme right is actually a person from OCHN, our clinical liaison, Megan Hebert. Our program could not operate without Megan. Megan does a terrific job for us, and I'll say for you folks as well. And we're really happy that she's part of our treatment team. To her left, Heather Ruffles. Heather is our chief probation officer in our court, and she is also our specialty court coordinator. Heather's the one that takes care of all of our grants and helping us to obtain our grant funding. She not only participates in our mental health treatment court, but also we run a veterans court program, and she is involved in that as well. To my near right is John Angot. John is an attorney here in Oakland County. Most of his practice is devoted to doing criminal defense work. And so as part of our treatment team, he is our defense attorney. And he participates in the team as well as representing all of the participants in our program when they come to court every other week. Also, as part of our team, we have a couple of other people who could not be here tonight. One is Chuck Snell. He is a prosecuting attorney, and he represents the prosecution side of cases as part of our treatment team. And then we also have a citizen representative as part of our treatment team, who I know you're all very familiar with because she comes to, I think, all of your meetings, and that's Elizabeth Bauer. She was unable to be here this evening, but she is our community liaison. So that is what makes up our treatment team. Now, what do we do? The goal of the mental health treatment court is to provide misdemeanor offenders with services and resources to reduce the likelihood that they will return to the criminal justice system. In other words, we're trying to do things to help keep them from reoffending. And we provide an intensive supervision for them that's coupled with treatment. Each participant has an individual treatment plan based upon their individual diagnosis. We offer our participants an opportunity to remain in their community while they attend treatment and participate in our program. Our treatment team, they assist me in coming up with the appropriate sentence and the appropriate treatment for each individual participant in the program. And we are funded through a grant that we received from the State Court Administrative Office. Now, who are our participants? Our participants in this program are people that commit misdemeanor offenses. And they also must reside in Oakland County. And they don't just come from cases that occur in our judicial district. Our judicial district, just as for the city of Oak Park, Huntington Woods, Pleasant Ridge, and Royal Oak Township, but we will accept transfers into our program from any district court in the state of Michigan. We currently have a number of other district courts in Oakland County that send us participants. But I must tell you that a lot of judges feel very territorial, and they don't necessarily like to let go of their probationers and refer them to us. So that has been somewhat of a problem, but as I think word spreads and people see what we're able to accomplish, we are getting greater recognition by some of my colleagues on the bench in Oakland County and even in Wayne County, and we are getting referrals from other courts. The other thing is they must have a an underlying mental health diagnosis. It's not just people suffering from mental illness. People with developmental disabilities are also eligible for our program, as long as the underlying primary diagnosis has to do with a mental health problem. So we will have and do have people in our program that are duly diagnosed. The other thing is that it's a voluntary program. People have to actually want to be a part of the program. And it is very intensive, and there are some people that when they find out just how intensive the program is, they will opt out of the program and just go back to a traditional probation. So let me tell you how it works a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to the others. They can tell you what they do as part of the process. We try to, first off, educate our prosecutors that work out of our court and our defense attorneys that who we are, and what we do, so that if they have an individual who's a defendant in a misdemeanor case, they could help identify likely participants in the program. As a judge, when I'm taking a plea or sometime in the process, if I identify that a person would be eligible for the program, I will address their defense attorney and them about the program, what it's all about, and hopefully they will become a candidate. If once they are convicted of a crime, either by a trial or a plea, and we identify them as a potential candidate, I will then refer them over to our probation department, so to Heather or one of the other probation officers, and they will hook them up with Megan. So Heather and Megan, if you want to perhaps enlighten us as to once that person gets referred to you, what you do as part of the process.
Megan and I will schedule an appointment. We always hold any appointment for pre-sentence interviewing through all of the phases of the program. We hold our appointments at the same time for ease of transportation issues. Quite frankly, almost all of our participants have significant transportation problems. So we set our appointment, and Megan will screen them first. She determines if they qualify, according to statute, if they qualify for the mental health program. So she makes certain that their primary diagnosis is a mental health diagnosis as opposed to substance use, or sometimes they don't have a mental health issue. They may have presented that way to someone, but they don't end up. And then I conduct a pre-sentence investigation. So I do a pretty thorough interview on myself or one of the other probation officers where we determine if they meet criteria for probation based upon criminal statutes. Do you want to discuss what you do as far as the screening?
So the screening that I use is actually just the access screening. So whenever anyone wants to get into treatment through OCHN, they call the access center and complete a screening over the phone, and that's typically what I use. I do ask more questions just to kind of get a sense of, their history, their current future, and when I meet with them initially, I spend a lot of time talking about the program, because as the judge said, it's a very intense program, and we have some people who they think at first they might want it, but when they hear the requirements, realize, with their work schedule and with if they have children or their transportation, sometimes it's not a good fit. So we don't want to set up our participants to have them not be successful in our program. So we really try to give them all the information up front to make sure that it's a good fit, that they want it, not just that, we think they're eligible, but that they really are motivated and want to do our program.
Or you can go on.
So after we make a determination that they're eligible for the program, we obviously have to set a hearing, and they're formally entered into the program on court record.
Let me ask you, Heather, are all misdemeanor convicts eligible for their program, or do we exclude someone based on certain criteria?
Recently, they just changed the legislation to allow for some violent offenders. So the current offense cannot be well, we wouldn't get them anyway because they wouldn't be misdemeanors, but they cannot have a criminal sexual conduct offense on their record, nor could that be the current offense. And they cannot have any felonious assaults with weapons or that caused great bodily harm up through, obviously, homicide. We would never take someone like that into the program. So once we make that determination, did you have something you wanted to say? So once we enter them into the program, we start working immediately on their treatment plan. They'll have some standard conditions that all individuals in probation have to complete, and then we work with the provider, whichever provider they're with, Easter Seals, CNS, TTI. We do have a few individuals with private pay insurance, but most of our individuals are funded through OCHN. So we start working at that point on their treatment plans.
Okay, now, just because someone meets the eligibility criteria does not mean that we automatically accept them into the program. And that's where our team comes into play. So John, as part of this team, he will participate in this, as will Megan, as will Heather, myself, and others, and we will actually discuss each individual participant to see if our program would be a good fit for them. So for instance, and John, I'm going to let you talk about one individual who you had represented actually in Royal Oak who came to our program, and then perhaps you could tell us, why you became an advocate for her to participate in our program.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. That particular person, I do some work in the 44th District Court in Royal Oak as well for Judge Meineke. He has a sobriety court there, and I represent the participants there with another attorney. We share those duties. One of the participants in that court was really struggling to meet all the obligations that were put forth in the sobriety court, despite the fact that it was a sobriety issue. She had a drinking problem, and it was very severe. But what we what we actually saw happening or emerging from her was it was more of a mental health issue. Her depression became so overwhelming that we began talking about perhaps finding a better fit. And luckily, this program, the mental health court program in the 45th District Court, was underway, well underway. We had successes already. We had a whole group of people, participants in the court, who were engaging it, who were not recidivists, were not committing other crimes. And that, I think, for at least in my view, really is kind of step one. Let's address the mental health issues and give them a forum where they can talk about the problems that they have and then offer more than that, and that's what the team effort comes into. So when we brought this particular young lady over to the mental health court, it was a night and day change. She immediately engaged the program. I was lucky enough to have had that relationship with her, the attorney-client relationship with her, and got to know her well enough where bringing her into the mental health court program, which is just as intense, perhaps even more intense than the sobriety court program, it eased her into the transition, was easier. She felt comfortable there. And frankly, to have Judge Goubeau overseeing these cases, I think, is a gift for all of these people, because the way he handles everybody and the way the team, they really just kind of get everything together. And my role, to put it simply, my role is the same as it always been. The rules don't change as to the legality of it. I have a duty to my clients with the privilege. I cannot give up their confidences. So it's kind of a quasi-role, because when I'm in the back room with the team meeting before court every other week, I get full participation in that. And it's almost like a dream for a defense attorney, because it's a chambers conference where I get more information than I would get in any other case that's not a part of this particular specialty court. And so when I go outside, I meet with my clients, every single one of them at every single court date. I just have a one-on-one, whether they're doing well, but more so if they have, in fact, violated the terms of their probation, because that part of the game doesn't change. They're still defendants, they're still under the jurisdiction of the court, and they have to follow the rules. And whatever is set forth by the judge regarding the probation, if they fail those terms, they face the same sanctions as if any other defendant not in a specialty court does. And so my role transitions into exactly what I do for a living every day. I represent them. But the success stories have been there, and the one in particular that we brought from Royal Oak, she's still in the program. She's had her struggles. I think every client that we've had, perhaps maybe two, just eased through the whole program. But I think she's going to be a great success story. I know some on the team are questioning that, but I have good confidence in her.
All right, thank you, John. Just an overview of what the program has, and I see it's up on the board there. We have 4 phases. They start in phase 1, they progress through phase 4, and they're, as they progress, there's less and less court supervision. So the goal is so that they will all be able to be out there and do well independently back in the community. The program for each participant, it varies in length from 12 months to 24 months. As they progress through the system, there are certain incentives that are built in for them. You know, it's a sort of a carrot and a stick. They get rewards for doing things and doing things well. And each participant is required to be in therapy, both individual and group. They are also required to see a psychiatrist. They're required to take their medications as prescribed. They're to follow all the treatment regimen that has been set forth by their providers. As I said, take the medication that has become part of, that's part of the order of probation. Substance abuse testing is mandatory for all participants in the program. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do have a grant. The grant allows us to do several things. One, to have a contract with OCHN so that you folks hired Megan to be our clinical liaison, and like I said, she does a terrific job, and I don't know where we'd be without her, and I can't give her enough praise. So job well done in that hire. The other thing that happens is people cannot use as an excuse, I don't have the money to do this or the money to do that, because the grant provides the money for all of the things that we require them to participate in. The testing paid for by the program, whether it's drug or alcohol testing, whether it's a SoberLink device, whatever, the program pays for the testing. So people don't have the excuses that they would have in some other probationary program. So that, while it's voluntary, when people understand that they might have testing in some other probation, that sometimes might push them over the top, that they'll become part of the program when they understand they don't have to pay for certain things. The other thing is we've worked out some really good relationships with our local police, because not every person is a success story. There are people that stumble and fall, and our local police agency's been very good about housing certain people for little sanctions, and maybe they have to spend a night, and instead of sending them to Oakland County Jail for a night, we can just have our local police agency keep them overnight in the lockup, and then they get released the next day as a sanction if they mess up. That department's also sent one of their sergeants to train here. The police training that you folks are involved in, our departments have also participated in that, and they are very understanding with people that have mental health problems when they're arrested, and they help us actually identify some participants for the program. So currently, active participants, we have 17 at the moment. And like I said, we have certain successes. Some have not done so well. Others have done very well. As I said earlier, each person is an individual. For some people that have more severe mental health issues, if we can just keep them on their medication and keep them from reoffending, that is a success. For others, they've been able to obtain a full-time employment, do a whole bunch of other things that we never thought possible when they entered the program. We've put through one graduating class, and part of that first graduating class, I would say, was one of our big successes. He might have been one individual that I didn't have a lot of hope for when we got started, but he and another individual in that first class proved me to be totally wrong. And I'm going to ask Heather to talk a little bit about him and what he's accomplished both during the program and since he has graduated from the program.
Individual came into the program, and as Judge Gubo stated, we were all pretty skeptical that he would be able to complete the program successfully. He was duly diagnosed. His mental health diagnosis was the primary diagnosis, but he had a very severe alcohol problem. He made some really large improvements in his personal life. He was able to obtain a full-time job while in our program. This was after he had engaged in substance abuse and mental health treatment. We had him on a dual track, and he was seeing his therapist weekly in the beginning, as well as attending both mental health and substance abuse groups. He engaged in support group attendance on his own. We did make that mandatory at some point, but he had chosen to start attending AA on his own and found a sponsor before we required him to do so as well. He was able to stabilize. He stayed on his medications, and he indicated to me at one of our appointments, we see them weekly, then biweekly, and then monthly. At one of his appointments, after he was in about maybe 5 or 6 months, he had indicated that this was the first time he had stayed on any medication for longer than a few months at a time. And that was big because he was also not self-medicating any longer with alcohol. So that was a really huge revelation to me that, wow, he's really working this program and all of the ancillary services we were able to set him up with. He became gainfully employed. Initially, it was kind of part-time, 3/4, full-time, and then it became full-time. Towards the end of graduation, he received a very significant promotion that allowed him to purchase a vehicle, allowed him to move into a more appropriate housing to allow his daughter, who he had also re-engaged with. He reunited with her. He had not had conversation with her other than hi, hello, how are you doing for birthdays or Christmas in several years. He re-engaged with her. They see each other at least weekly now. And that was probably the biggest success for him, regardless of his new employment, his new housing, the new vehicle, was that he was able to get his daughter back. So I just spoke with him a month or so ago. He called because he just wanted to check in and say hi and let me know that he was still doing really well and things were still on the uptick for him. So that's one of the few times in my line of work as a probation officer that you actually ever hear a thank you or a, this worked. What you did meant change for me. One of the things that I've taken away from mental health court is I personally, and we as a team, we really measure people's success, some individuals, by centimeters. It's very different than anything else I've ever done in the court system. So we really are working with individuals on an individual basis, not just this is what you did and this is what we think you need to do. We really are working with them to have these success stories.
We are about to, this summer we'll be having our second graduating class. So, Heather, you want to maybe just talk about what we do with regard to graduation for folks?
Oh, sure. So we made a pretty conscious decision early on when we talked about graduations for the veterans court that we run at the 45th. We do a keynote speaker. We invite the public to come in, city council members from our funding units, that kind of thing. But when we had a conversation with a couple of the early on participants in mental health court, we realized that wasn't a good fit for them. They really don't want that type of recognition. So we kind of scale it back a little. They get a certificate. We ask them to say a few words at graduation. And we make it very low-key. The judge doesn't sit at the bench. He comes down and he talks to them. He took his robe off, which is never done in a courtroom. So he really made it personal for them so that they understood how important this was to us, that they were successful in our program. And then we have some little, sweets and what did we get? Juice and pop. We don't want to sugar them up too much. But we felt like being a little more low-key was a better fit for this group. So we will hold our next one. We don't have a date yet. Oh, I'm sorry, they also get a gift card. So that's one of the benefits with the grant is the research indicates for specialty courts in general, but specifically mental health courts, that the incentives we give really have oftentimes more meaning to the participants than they do in other programs. So we've tried to kind of come up with things that might be something they wouldn't be able to purchase if they're on a fixed income or something of that nature. So we provide them with gift cards to either gas stations or restaurants. For graduation, we always do a gift card to a movie because it's not something everybody has an opportunity to do for themselves. So we purchase that as well.
Thank you, Heather. So let me just touch upon a couple of other things, and then we'll open it up if you have any questions for us. With regard to all of us, we do participate in continuing education with regard to this program. So annually, we participate in conferences. We go to Lansing for specialty court conferences. So we continue to try to educate ourselves as to all of the best practices in operating this specialty court. So with regard to us, we are continuing to educate ourselves as the best treatment policies. We really want to continue to reach out to you folks because there are some things that you can do to help us run a better program and get better outcomes for our participants. Specifically, and I have a couple of things, you folks do kind of hold all of the provider contracts now. So one of the issues that we had and perhaps still have is getting people into therapy assessments and starting their therapy and meeting with psychiatrists in a very timely manner. It's been a problem. If I order someone into treatment as part of their probation and they have to wait 30 days or more to see a psychiatrist, that's a problem for our program, and it's a problem for the participant. If they get assigned to a particular agency, whether it's Easter Seals or one of the other programs, and they can't get that therapy assessment and start their treatment, even though they've been assigned and may have a case manager, it still is a problem as far as them being successful in the program. So or if I have someone that's in the jail that is in need of some treatment. So Megan has done a wonderful job in working with your jail liaison person and cutting through a lot of things so that those folks can start things while they're still in jail. So when we've recognized that problem, she has helped us address that. We've made some progress in getting things, the process sped up a little bit with regard to those that assessment and treatment. But it still, has a long way to go so that each and every participant in our program can get things in a timely manner. I think one of the problems is that they might not know the right things to say when they make that initial contact. So I guess, we need to make sure they use the right language when they make that call to set up that first appointment. Because there are times when some people have gotten immediately in to see someone, and then there's other people that just have to wait. So I guess if you can help us with greater consistency and timeliness for these folks to be able to get the necessary treatment in place, that would be terrific. And I know you have contracts with different folks, and if they're not doing what you contract with them to do, then you need to get tough on them. And if you do, we're behind you. we got your back on that one. So, so I think I'm maybe I'll just mention one other thing. There's a whole lot of stakeholders in this county with regard to mental health issues. And when we got started, we tried to identify all of the stakeholders that we felt should be involved with this treatment court. And we did hold a number of meetings with regard to stakeholders. We've, in a sense, made all of them part of our advisory committee. And we at least annually hold meetings of all of those folks to continue to keep them updated as to what we're doing, what we're all about, and seek other advice and counsel. One of the benefits with that has been that a number of our participants either have housing or transportation issues. So because we've had discussions with those folks in the past, they know who we are, and we can reach out to them on an individual case-by-case basis to seek their assistance with regard to an individual participant's needs for housing or transportation. And we will continue to do that. And then the other thing, as far as outreach, we do try to get out in the community and meet with folks out there to let them know who we are and what we're all about. So I think I'm going to end there, and if you have any questions for us, we're happy to answer. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here. I think as part of that, I was going to say the contact person, the best person to contact if you need anything specifically would be to just call Heather directly or work through Megan. She's got our number too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Malchiah, then Mr. Rubin.
I don't have a question. I'm so excited about what you're doing, because being a person who lived a whole adult life with a mental illness I didn't know I had, and then getting the support I needed gave me a life. I understand that feeling. And I don't know, well, I did have a question. I just wondered what motivated you to get involved in this, because you seem very passionate about it. And people know me, I cry at the drop of a hat, but this is just phenomenal to me that there's a court that is taking the extra steps that's necessary to make sure that people who are struggling can get on firmer foundation. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you for those kind words. Well, we got started with this when I'll say Heather first approached me about doing this. Our court had been doing a veterans court program, and Heather approached me about doing a mental health court. In an earlier life, I used to be part of the Michigan House of Representatives. I was a legislator, state rep for 14 years, and I was chair of the House Mental Health Committee for many of those years. So I got to know a lot of the people that work in the mental health arena, and so I did a lot of things in the mental health area. Back, so if we could have a long history talk here someday, but from when when Governor Engler was closing all the institutions, I was involved there looking out to make sure people's rights were protected. When Lafayette Clinic was closed under the cover of darkness, and people had their belongings placed in garbage bags and they were shipped to a variety of institutions, I held hearings in the legislature about that closing and what was happening with all the individuals and the impact it had upon them and their families. So I do have a history of having worked in this area for quite some time, and I guess Heather was somewhat familiar with my background, and so it didn't take much for her to push me into doing this. And then as part of the process in starting this court, we did travel around the state of Michigan and saw what was going on in the Ingham County, in Wayne, the district court in Wayne, Western Wayne County, but for the city of Wayne, and other places, and we just thought it was the right thing to do to help people in our community. So that's how we got started, and hopefully it will continue to grow.
God bless you, and thank you so much.
Rubin.
Promise I won't be as emotional as my friend here, but Judge, thank you very much for coming here and with your staff. I had a couple of questions and one comment. Can any of these people take online programs? Are there any treatment programs that can be taken online?
I'm not aware of any that are online. We do have some like didactic programming for alcohol offenders that they can do online, but I'm not aware of anything more in the mental health field. I'm not sure if you are, Megan.
I know, like, some of our providers, I think that one in particular, OFS, has like telepsych, but I don't know of any programs that offer. I've heard like it's becoming more popular. People can do sessions online via Skype, but I don't know of any particular like treatment providers or individuals who do it. I'm sure we could find one if we needed to, but I don't know anyone offhand.
The only reason I brought that up is because you mentioned transportation is one of the big problems. And what is the role of a sponsor? Each one has to have a sponsor, I heard, correct?
So as far as a sponsor, that's typically in support groups. So AA, NA, those are the most common. We do actually allow individuals to attend support group meetings online. They do have open forums for that we do allow them to, because we're able to verify it. It's actually a better verification, quite honestly, than signatures and in-person meetings. But so a role of the sponsor is kind of like your peer support would be the best way to compare to what OCHN offers at some of their agencies. So they're there for them any time of day, whenever they are struggling or they need sober support. They can reach out to their sponsor.
Lastly, thank you very much for taking chances on people. Jail is not the answer for everyone. And thank you all.
Is Judge Apple also doing, how does her court fit in?
She's one. There's two judges in our court, myself and Judge Apple. She oversees the Veterans Treatment Court program. So as far as specialty courts, so she does one, I do this one, and then we each have our regular everyday work that we do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Arrington.
Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's wonderful, the work you're doing, but I'm wondering, I understand you are funded by a grant. Are you at capacity in terms of the people you're serving, and do you anticipate broadening this program or receiving funds that will help you to broaden it?
We're not at capacity of the program. We have plenty of room. Yet, like I said, we only have 17 participants. We could do up to
Technically, they tell us 50,
but that's a lot of people to take care of. If we're at 25, we're on the same wavelength. If we're at 25, kind of pretty regularly or thereabouts, that would be ideal, just based on, the amount of context they have to have at our court with regard to our case manager, the amount of times they have to meet with Heather and Megan, the number of times they have to meet with me. 25 would be a very doable number, but we have capacity to do more. The grant that we get's an annual grant, so we're good through the rest of this year through
September 30th of 2019.
And we'll be applying again. And there aren't that many mental health courts in the state, so while they continue to increase the number of substance, like drug and alcohol kinds of courts, and their funding might be somewhat on the decline because of just the volume. There aren't that many mental health treatment courts, so we actually were able to get more money in our last grant. We hope that will continue. If for some reason the grant goes away and there's no state monies involved for this, then we'd have to take a really hard look to see what we could do, because without having the state money, it'd be really impossible. While we could continue to do the same kinds of things for the participants in the program, we could not afford to do all the testing. That's very expensive. We could not afford on our own to have a person like Megan be our clinical liaison. So could we still be an intensive probation type of program? Yes, but could we provide all the services for the participants? No. So, the grant is very, very important for us to continue to exist and operate the way we do.
The state administrator will recognize your success story.
hoping.
That's our goal.
We do have some lofty goals in mind. I know I do. Down the road, I would really like to become a regional mental health court, which would allow us to not be limited by Oakland County residency. Currently, that is a big issue for us as we do border Wayne County. We have identified a large number of individuals that would really benefit from the mental health court, but because they don't reside in Oakland County, we cannot take them in. It's very tricky. We're in a unique location to have so many individuals. Within our court, we guesstimate, we don't have hard numbers at this point, we do guesstimate that about 60% of our caseload do not reside in Oakland County. So we would like to, at some point, look into a regional program. What that would look like, I can't tell you right now. I have some visions of what I think it would look like, but that would require obviously additional funding because we would have to partner with two different county community mental health organizations. So
we identify a lot of people that would benefit from our program, but they live south of 8 Mile. So the gentleman before, when he said he never thought he was going to go north of 8 Mile, we have some folks, it's like, well, when you got arrested on this offense, you were living with your mother over here in Oakland County. As long as you can stay there, then you can be part of our program. But if you want to move and live with your father south of 8 Mile, then you can't be part of the program. So mental health services and should not be based on geography. That's always been my opinion. But the way the state laws have been created with regard to, various CMHs, et cetera, that does pose a problem. Now, Judge Boyd, who's in Ingham County, he kind of has a really good situation because his CMH is 3 counties. And so pretty much anywhere around him, people are eligible because the mental health program encompasses residents from 3 counties. So we have this dilemma here where we're located. And as you folks really know, people that have these problems don't just stay in one place. They tend to move about.
Just had one, is there anything like this in the circuit court?
Yes, not exactly like we do, but the circuit court is working on a couple of things. One, they do have a treatment court, but it's different than ours. And they're also trying to develop a treatment court for juveniles. So someone is, under 17 years of age and they're in the juvenile court system, circuit court's working on developing a mental health treatment court for those individuals now.
Other questions? I have several. First of all, I just want to say that you have brought this to life. Having this on paper would never do justice to the energy and the positivity that you bring to this, and I'm so grateful on behalf of the people who are able to benefit, and it's a wonderful thing to have in our county, and I really appreciate that. So I just wanted you to know that I think the impact is remarkable and good for all of you for having this supportive approach and being so collaborative with each other. There's a bunch of little turf areas that could get in the way, and they don't seem to, and that can only be better for people. So that's just terrific. My question is, do you have any role for the people who have graduated the program within this, the mental health court? Are you able to use that experience, expertise?
Good question, and that's something we've talked about, and we're trying to, I'm going to let Heather talk about it a little bit more, but that is something that we really would like to incorporate in the program. So right now, we've only had 3 graduates. The one individual who she's talked about would be an ideal person. So like when he was graduating and at other times during the program, he was able to talk to other participants in the program and say how it's benefited him in ways and a variety of things. So some other courts do some things like with alumni that way. So I'm going to let Heather talk about that because we have discussed it, but again, we're still new and we're kind of gradually adding new things to it. So Heather, you want to talk about that a little bit?
That is the plan. Ultimately, depending upon what research you look at, 6 months is the minimum amount of time someone should have graduated from the program before they came back to participate as an alumni or a mentor potentially. What we do for our veterans court is they have to have been out of the program for a minimum of a year with no new offenses, obviously, and then they have to provide us with something in writing verifying the reasoning that they want to come back. So that's something that I don't quite have worked out, to be very honest, but it is on the back burner as we have more graduates leave the program. I envision it to be similar to like a peer support or a mentor.
Are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Downey?
Just wanted to say, I'm Annette Downey, I'm the CEO here, and we do value your partnership. I did hear what you said about timeliness and starting services, and in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking of all the state measures that say from the time of access or eligibility, there's timelines to start services, whether it's 7 days or 14 days, depending on urgent or non-urgent or routine. But as you said, that's starting case management, which is different from starting therapy. So you have my commitment. I will look into the data and see what kind of timelines we're talking about and how we can look to improve on that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
One last chance, any comments or questions at this time? Well, thank you so much for your effort, and I know that it can only benefit those who come in contact with you, so thank you.
I was going to say thank you, and maybe we'll make this an annual thing. We'll come back and talk to you, give you an update next year.
We can work with that. The next item on our agenda is the October and November financials and the building update.
To put me after like a great like presentation because mine is so boring.
Opportunity.
Right. So it's not my intent to go through October statements unless anybody has any particular questions. I'm going to go through November's. Specifically because obviously we've been down this road before. Early financial statements in the year tend to have some variances that we'll talk through, but are really at the beginning of the year. So you all know how this process goes, where we put the budget together and we put it together really in August, and you all approve it in September. So by the time we're at this point, we're a solid 6 months out from when we did that. So you'll see some of the variances that I'll talk about, some of which are going to be addressed as we go into doing budget amendment number 1. But you can some of this is just early in the year stuff that we see, and as we go from the planned budget to the negotiated contracts to actually starting to see expenses and revenue come in, those things fluctuate. So really, these early statements tend to have some variances that we'll talk through. But does anyone have any question about October specifically? Otherwise, I'm just going to jump into November.
Any questions at this time?
So if you drop down to the November statement of net position, I'll wait till we get there on the screen. So what you're looking at, so that really does give you October and November, just because we do the comparative month over month. And yes, Jonathan, I remember you did ask for year over year. And as soon as we get through year end, we'll start to go back. And in order to do that, we have to modify the report formats. And right now, when we're about to go into the audit, is not when we want to mess with that a bit. So as soon as we get through this and get through the majority of the audit, we can look into doing that for 19.
Right now, while we don't really have a budget that's truly.
Right. So looking at the November statement of net position, you see cash between the two accounts is at about $10.2 million. Investments remain relatively consistent at about $34 million. What you'll see again as we go through this process of year end and then updating the budget, the due from providers will adjust as we finalize those numbers. That's what we are working on right now, is finalizing what we think the provider accounts will look like for year end, any incentives that are earned, any money that is due back to us. Those things are all getting adjusted right now. So those things all get updated once this process is done. So a lot of the time, these statements don't actually account for some of those adjustments that will happen in another month or two. So again, these are very early statements. That's why I say there's a lot of variance going on, and now these are based on a budget that was an estimate about 6 months ago. So for the most part, assets are what we would expect them to be at this point. You can see we right now have due from providers at about $12.5 million. That's, again, an estimate based on current year-end accruals and things like that. So total assets remains at about $94 million, and that includes the building and our residential homes. Moving down to liabilities, you're going to see the same things going on. Again, with year-end happening, you see that accounts payable, providers and vendors is up high, again, because it has some provider accruals in there and things that need to be accrued there at year-end that are getting flushed out during the first couple of months of the next fiscal year. Again, those things will all change as we go through this year-end process. We've got 1 week and 2 days and counting until they're due. So we're wrapping that all up right now. Moving down to non-current liabilities, you can see the Oakland County bond payable, which is the Resource and Crisis Center, sits at $9.4 million, and then the mortgage note payable sits at $4.9 million currently. Jumping down to our total net position, if you total those two up, is about $57 million. Any question on the statement of net position before I move on to revenue?
Not at this time, I guess.
Okay. So if we go over to revenue, what you're going to see over, I'm going to look at both the current month and the year-to-date. So we're basically on budget for revenue for both the month and year-to-date. Again, this is pretty early in the year. I will make a few little tweaks as we go into Budget Amendment 1 just to update the accruals based on the information we have now that we start to see the money come in and those types of things. So when we get through Budget Amendment 1, these will even become a little closer to than even what you see right there. General fund amount is consistent month over month. That hasn't changed in a few years. And then the other ones you see in other. So those have some pretty material variances, but those are all timing variances at this point. So grants we usually bill quarterly. OBRA we typically don't bill every month. So all of those things in that section tend to be our revenue sources that aren't necessarily consistent on a month-to-month basis. But overall, we're pretty close to budget at this point at just with a 2.5% variance through November.
Question on this one. Are we seeing any further erosion of Medicaid plan enrollments? I know that's what drives our revenue by plan group.
So that is what, in order to prep for Budget Amendment 1, we will redo all of the estimates we had for this original budget, and then that will be updated in Budget Amendment 1. So any small adjustments that need to be made in that, what you see there is the actuals. So what that tells us is we're pretty close to what we originally estimated. But again, if there's anything we're seeing as far as a trend goes, we will update that in Budget Amendment number 1.
We don't have that yet. Are you seeing anything yet?
Or based on what we're actually getting in, it's pretty close. So I would say it's slowing down, which is a conservative estimate at this point. I hesitate to say it's going to, hopefully it's flat. Well, yeah, at some point we've got to level off. There's at some point what we'll see with the shift to Healthy Michigan, you're going to see the people that did shift have to go back. Just by default of being on it for 4 years, they're going to end up back. So that essentially becomes where they start to smooth back out. So we should actually start to see that sometime this fiscal year. And so we're watching for that.
TANF and DAB issue.
That's exactly what I'm referring to as the DAB issue. So those people that we expected to be funded under the DAB program shifted to Healthy Michigan, but after 4 years, by default, they're going to end up back. So there's some shuffling that will go on the next couple of fiscal years with that because people will realize they're not allowed to stay on Healthy Michigan long-term.
Last question on it. I know late last year we had an adjustment by the state because of the
DAB issue.
Yes, that DAB issue. Do we see that changing, or do we think there might be an additional adjustment for this year? Or have they corrected that?
So what they added to the appropriation last year was $60 million. So that continued into fiscal year 19. And then if you recall, we expected to see a geographic factor update in January. They're not doing it now. So the last rate setting meeting I went to, they're talking about an entirely different set of logic. And so luckily for us, they're going to engage us a little more in that process. And so it was a good meeting. We talked about what things we thought should be in the logic. And so they're going to take a look at that and then let us see it before they say, here's your rates for 20. But that does mean that we don't get the adjustment in January, which I do think would have benefited us. Okay. Any other questions on revenue before I move? Okay, moving on to expenses. For administration, for the current month, we're almost exactly on budget, and you see fiscal year to date, we're about 8% under budget. That's pretty standard this early in the year, and we have some budgeted positions that are not filled. So I would expect that variance to continue, at least for a while. Moving down to provider expenses. What you see going on here, I'm going to speak to core provider adults specifically right now, is, like I said, when we developed this budget in August, between August and the end of September was when we actually negotiated those amounts with core providers. So what you're seeing, that variance there, is essentially some of the negotiation that went back and forth related to the administrative amounts that we talked about late fiscal year 18. As we transition those specialized residential contracts back to us. So that's some of the variance you see. So I'll update that with budget amendment number 1, but it is where I expect it to be based on those negotiations. It just varies from what we had originally budgeted, if you recall. Moving down, what you see for the residential looks to be about almost $1 million under budget for the year. I actually think that's a bit of lag in billing, because if you recall, they were all new to us in October. So it takes some time for them to get used to billing us and how to bill us and those types of things. So some of that's a little slow to get onto where we expect it to be. I do expect that to catch up at some point. I had one of my staff check on that, and we do expect the expense to catch up to the budgeted amount. It's just that this was new for everybody early in the year. Crisis and acute care, that one is projected over budget right now. What you see, what causes that in this early in the year is really the accrual. It's the accrual based on the number of admissions and the number of days that are sitting out there that are authorized. So as we go through the year, we're talking about tweaking how we accrue that. So there's a little work I think we're going to do on that, but we have seen an increase in the utilization of hospitals and people waiting for state facilities. So that's one of the things we're working on with residential providers, is a way to help people not go into state facilities and not stay in the hospital any longer than necessary. Let's see, moving down to vocational, you can see that's really close to budget, just about 7% off for the month. Substance use is a little over for the month. That's another one. The budgeted amount versus what we actually ended up planning to spend for the year is different. So again, that's another one we're going to update in budget amendment number 1. Core provider kids, you see, is slightly over for the month. That is one we did go back and decide to adjust the service model rate for home-based kids service model. So that rate did get adjusted. So that's some of what you're seeing going on there. And with the administrative amounts that we negotiated, that's causing that variance as well. Looking at ABA services, that's slightly over budget for the month. That's one of those that we projected a specific amount of increase based on the trends we're seeing. And as we go through the year, we'll watch that and then adjust it as needed. If we start to see that continue to go up and consistently be up like that, we will adjust the budget appropriately. As you know, that there's kind of been a backlog of services for that population. So we would expect that to go up throughout the year. Housing services, you can see, is right on budget. Claims tax is essentially a wash based on revenue. Grant expense is right a little off budget, but again, that's timing issues with the grants this early in the year. Local match is always exact, as state facilities is an accrual because we actually don't see those bills for several months out. So you see those are being accrued based on the estimates for the year. Resource Crisis Center looks to be about right at budget this early in the year. And then healthcare integration, as you all know, is OCHN or Honor Healthcare. Did I get that right? Honor Healthcare. So they bill us, they do quarterly payments, not monthly, so you'll see that variance just from time to time. And then purchase service other, you've heard me talk about that one before. That one's not a 1/12. We pay those as they come. It's kind of our catch-all for all the non-regular service type contracts. So that one you'll see fluctuate quite a bit. But what you can see is we're just under 3% variance from budget, but as I said, this budget was done a solid 6 months ago, so when we update budget amendment number 1, once we get through year-end reporting, this will be even closer than that.
Mentioned that you had to make an adjustment in the funding model for provider kids. Has there been any other adjustments in the funding models made?
I think we ended up doing rate adjustments, I believe we did in targeted case management, and that was it, from what I recall. So we did that back several months before the end of the fiscal year so that they could be in place for the start of the fiscal year. So I believe those were the only two that had rate adjustments. The rest of them stayed consistent to prior years.
Just going to update Melchiah. I met with the core provider CEOs this morning, and they thanked us for the rate adjustments that we'd made. Plus, when they were in the first year of implementation of these new funding models, several had to use the risk language of their contract, meaning it was our first year implementing this new model, and we didn't. We made them whole on their deficits for the first year. Then going into the next year, those that we could demonstrate that indeed it was the rate needed to be adjusted, we made the adjustments, and others, some of the dialogue was you do need to adjust your service models in order to maximize. So interestingly, the therapy feedback that we just got with the new case management, target case management model, the providers who do implement more therapy, more timely therapy, get paid more, but it's taking some time for them to adjust to a new way of doing business. But nonetheless, the CEOs expressed gratitude for the changes we made in the rate structures through our negotiation based on what they were initially paid and how we used the risk language to make them whole for the first year of implementation.
The other thing that was part of the risk language was a plan to get to live within the service models. So all of them demonstrated that successfully, and that was one of the criteria to have the risk coverage for fiscal year 18. So they were able to do that in order to receive that coverage.
To hear that I haven't heard, and that's with the peers.
So we
There
still
was no adjustment.
so the plan with peers is not necessarily to adjust the rate, but to adjust the logic, if that makes sense. So it's not that the rate is necessarily bad. I think my understanding is it's really that it's not encouraging additional use of peers as opposed to just saying if you do it once, you get the payment. So we have to look at how we might pay for peer services differently to make sure that we're encouraging as much use of peers as we can. But we have not done that adjustment just yet. Just because that process was well done before we had talked about that. But we'll get to that. It's just a matter of taking a look at the peer logic and how to pay for peer services in order to encourage the use of it.
It would be valuable for that to be a targeted update.
Yes, I was just going to say, I can't remember, we have tentative agenda items for March and April. I know we're going to confirm it when we meet in the study session next week, but an update, looking at the data, looking at the difference in the payment model, impact on peers, and then what our direction will be going forward is on a future agenda item for the board's feedback. So we haven't lost that as a priority for sure.
I can't let it go. That's why
No.
I keep bringing it back. I can't let it go.
No, and it's not that we don't agree with you. We need to do something different with it. We've heard feedback from not just you on that, and so it's just making sure that we look at that and what's the most effective way to make sure that we're having peers utilized as best we can. But you're not the only one that's given us that feedback.
Not hearing anything about it is what concerns me.
I'm going to own that because that I just haven't had a chance to dig into that and make sure that the data is up front and we have the chance to discuss that. So I'll own that. That's on me.
Beauty of getting it on an agenda item, then it has to be ready. So we will confirm next week which meeting you guys will get an update. And as said, the rate itself is a fair rate, but if the way we have it structured means that it's leading to less encounters, less use of peers, then we're not structuring it right. So we made some assumptions about the rate and, these case rates and per month funding. is what's being used nationally all over the place, but we don't want it to have a negative impact on pair services. So we will look at doing it different if that's what we need to do, because we don't want to see a decline at all, for sure.
Other questions on this aspect? Apparently not.
Okay, so that ends my financials update. The other thing I wanted to bring to the board's attention, and I appreciate you all adding it to the agenda. So this came to me late last week, so I apologize for the short notice, but I kind of am going to query from the board how you would like to me to handle this. As you know, we signed a lease with CHN a month or so back, and so now it's come time to do build-out. And so the construction company would like to start on Saturday. So the little bit tricky situation now is that we're in the building. And so they can't really do demolition and things like that while we're here, so they have to kind of work it around nighttime, weekends, that kind of stuff. So in order to do that in a timely manner, they want to get started. But what that means is they can't start until I've signed a document, because they can't be in the building without the appropriate contracts, things like that, making sure everybody's insured and we're covered. Typically, I would bring to you all any contract over $100,000. And so what this has done is put me in a bit of a time crunch in that I can't let them start until I sign the document. I haven't signed the document because you all haven't approved it. So I guess I'm looking to you all as how you'd like me to handle this in this particular situation. I could push them off another month and tell them they can't start until after the next board meeting. So I really kind of defer to you all as to how you'd like me to handle that one.
Dialogue. Mr. Rubin?
Well, I'm a little familiar with the transaction. I've met with Anya and Patrick and, sorry. Anyway, I met with them over this situation, and I think they're on the right track. They're doing the right thing. They've got a good lease. There's going to be a lot of nice things being presented to the board shortly. This is one of them. We're glad that they're leasing the space. That's added revenue. That's going to fit in nice because they're going to be working on their balance sheet. And I got a lot. We've accomplished quite a bit together. I compliment them on the role that they each play. I've learned quite a bit. I've learned how the cash flow comes in. I've learned how the cash flow goes out. And it's unusual because much of it, and I know that Steve asked a question a few weeks ago about what do we do with the cash in the middle of the month, or if there's excess cash, how is it invested? They're going to be reviewing their investment policies and programs, but there's not that much cash that's left over in the middle of the month because of the way their cash comes in, which is unusual, and it poses a challenge for efficiency in our department here. And much of it goes out as fast as it comes in. And that's it's not because they're behind in their payables, it's because that's how their payments are scheduled. And that protects the providers as well, which is good business sense. Is getting back to the building now. They made a very good deal. I think much of the capital outlay is going to come back to us in rent from the renters. That's going to be built. The build-out is going to, the cost of the build-out is going to be put into the monthly rent payments. Am I right on that?
Yeah, that's correct. All of it is built
Yeah.
into the lease amount.
And it's a, per square foot, the amount of the build-out is within line of what normal build-outs run. And so my vote would really be to get going on this. And we've had some discussion about the $100,000 number. I'm not convinced that that $100,000 number that we all agreed to for board approval is really necessary. Was really meant for the board to have to approve that. But nonetheless, I suggested, and I think all three are convinced that at least we should get the board's approval on something like that. I'm all for starting this program before it even has any indication of falling apart. And hope we can get in there, they can get in there as quickly as possible. So I don't have any issue with approving that, giving you permission to go forward, as it's presented. That's my report.
Yeah, just reminding you, with our rules and bylaws and Robert's rules, traditionally we vote on things at a board meeting and sometimes have a special board meeting like we did last week. But when we have a quorum, we can make a motion and vote on it. So I'm just saying, it doesn't have to wait till the next board meeting if there's a time urgency or something. As long as we have a presentation and discussion and a motion and a quorum.
According to the bylaws, Yes. I'm sorry, board policies. Page 7, no single purchase or contract greater than 100,000 is made without approval of the board. So it doesn't necessarily mean we need to see the contract. We just need to know what the proposal is and the ask is, so we could, under a motion, vote and approve it if we thought it was sound practice. And Sid, I guess you were involved with it, so we have to take it on your advice or suggestion that you think it's solid or whole. You're probably our most senior board person as it comes to finance.
Well, I appreciate the fact that I had that opportunity to sit and meet because we covered an awful lot of material. And there's some good news, and then there's some challenging news. I don't consider any of it bad news. I just consider it challenging news. And like I say, the board will be apprised of all that in due time, because I don't think we've finalized some other financial matters that's going to strengthen the balance sheet. So they'll have to make that presentation.
I was going to remind everybody, Thursday's study session next week is the detailed analysis of the tenant situation, the incoming rent, the financials that you asked for, Jonathan, projecting building costs once the income is in from rent and such. So you guys will get the very detailed report and lots of discussion next week on Thursday at the study session about the building specifically.
Newman?
If I understand Anya correctly, she needs to be able to sign whatever documentation needs to be signed so that they can come in and start this week. So
If you all don't want me to have them, I can tell them they have to wait, but they want to start. I've already pushed them off a week. I told them they couldn't start last Saturday. So they want to start on Saturday. But if the board wants more time to discuss it next week, I can tell them they have to wait. It's up to you all.
I'll speak for myself. I would much rather them get started because, the sooner they start, the sooner the people be in, the sooner we'll be able to collect the revenue. I wouldn't want to put it off, but my question is, do we have to correct the agenda to put a vote item on the agenda?
I believe we did amend it to include a building update. I think it would fall under that umbrella. And if Anya would be willing to articulate the recommendation, I think we can probably come to a vote.
Okay. So my recommendation will be to go ahead and sign the build-out document in order to let them get started on Saturday. They'll start with demolition again. That's entirely because we're inhabiting the building now, so doing that during business hours becomes a little cumbersome. So it will take them a little more time than it might otherwise when they have full access to the building all day long. So I'd like them to get started, and I do recommend that at this point, just so they can get started, because in my experience, especially based on this building, it always takes longer than we think it's going to take. So again, I don't want to be pushing up against it when our new tenants are hoping to move in.
In like one sentence.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Okay. So I would recommend approving me signing the contract for the build-out for our new tenants.
That's not in order. And it was explained that it exceeds our policy, our designated amount for approval. So
I tell-
anything, our policy is anything in excess of $100,000 comes before the board for approval.
Correct. As Mr. Rubin mentioned, we did discuss this, so he's aware of the specifics and the rate.
We're going to be getting this money back in the form of rent over the term of the lease. So it's not money that we're going to never see again. We're going to be replenishing it almost immediately.
There a motion to approve the recommendation to proceed with the build-out beginning on Saturday?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, so moved by Ms. Schulman and support by Ms. Newman. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Saturday's the go. Thank you. Item is Ms. Downey giving us the challenges and accomplishments.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. This presentation was developed, I did a similar presentation at the last association conference. I was partnered with some other PIHP CEOs, and we were asked to do a board work session about the PIHP structure overview, challenges and accomplishments. I had talked to Judy a little bit about it, and she thought it might be valuable just to talk to the board. So it's very much a high-level overview. I do want to say, I'm always excited to get in front of you guys and share information and our direction. I just want you to know if I feel off or if I seem off, my heart is hurting right now. I did not know about Paige Cummings passing away, so I do want to offer Fred and Hope my condolences. I didn't know, and that bothers me that I didn't know, because I came from the service provider world where I was very close to people and being in my new position, and I wish my heart hurts for them. But nonetheless, I want to talk to you about PIHP structure, the important work we do, and obviously we're in a time when we are having lots of challenges at the high level. So I wanted to start with the history in Michigan, and this is just kind of overview of what happens in the 1990s is when Michigan was going through our major times of change. Nationally, the rest of the country is going through these changes currently. Where we adopted person-centered planning in 1996, we got self-determination grants here in Michigan in 1997, and we made the switch to managed care for mental health services, including services for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities in 1998. So basically, prior to that time, we were a fee-for-service state where services were provided, everything was billed, fee-for-service, and a switch to managed care meant more like a pot of money to each region to serve all the individuals. Now, there were several things happening in the 90s that led Michigan to make these decisions. One was the rapidly rising costs. So that's the downside of fee-for-service models, is that they're, the reimbursement or income comes from providing more service, more service, more service. It's not necessarily tied to outcomes. But what was most troubling to so many people, particularly in the advocacy community, is because we had so many people in the state that were getting what you might call like the Cadillac of service, big old packages of services, there wasn't enough money to serve everybody. So in other states in the nation, there are still many years of sitting on the waiting list before you can get any services. We should be quite proud in Michigan that our front door, people are shocked to hear that you can call and get screening of eligibility over the phone and get in for access, and services start within 14 days, or at least your planning meeting is held, and then they start 14 days after that. Most places do not have that. And it was our shift in Michigan towards managed care that helped us open the front door instead of putting people on the waiting list. And that's what I did for the first 3 years of my career, was gather all the information to get people's names on the waiting list. So our model, and depending on where you come from and where you sit with regard to managed care, I think Michigan did it well in the way that they structured our publicly funded and locally governed system in managed care to open the front door for all. So one of the things they did, though, in the rollout, and this was the rollout that happened in the 90s, is the state leaders at that time were very intentional about partnering with the advocacy community and the stakeholders. Again, we were one of the first states to do this, so it was kind of unheard of to have managed care in an environment such as ours. But they held public forums, they held stakeholders for engagement, there were written responses to questions that were entered, and it really was a partnership. So often when people are very fearful of managed care, they say it seems like something that's hatched in a back room and that people don't understand it and they don't understand why somebody would want to go in that direction. And I would say with some of the shifts and the things we're hearing with going with the for-profit health plans, we probably all have felt a little bit like that, not a valued partner around the table. But back in the 90s when the shift happened in Michigan, we were all partners around the table. And the intention of going to managed care was not as a money-saving measure, which in some states it very, very much is. It's an effort to save dollars. At this time, back in the 90s, it was an effort to correct the issue of having people with haves and have-nots. So you had people that were sitting on the waiting list. When I would gather the packet to get their name on the waiting list, I was told to tell people it'll be 10, 11 years before your name comes up to the top of the waiting list. And then you had other people that had more services, overserved. Maybe they lived in a group home, a 5-day day program, a nurse, a psychologist, an OT, a PT. Back then we had recreational therapists, music therapists, huge service packages, but then we had thousands of people waiting for 10 to 11 years. So if we were going to try to eliminate the waiting list here in Michigan with no new money, there wasn't more money poured into the system, it became obvious that business as usual could not continue. And that's how the PIHPs were originally developed. While the managed care submission was going into the federal government, we were also renewing our waiver. So it was the 1915 BC waiver, and there were some things that were put in that waiver that also helped people feel more comfortable moving towards managed care, and it was assurances regarding person-centered planning, self-determination, active engagement. Now, we don't hear that term very much anymore, but it was mainly saying we're not just going to maintain people. Our services have to be actively trying to help people progress in their life. And then, of course, due process and recipient rights and things like that. So if a managed care entity made a decision that somebody didn't agree with, people had rights. So our state advocacy organizations partnered with the state and were highly supportive of making this move in Michigan. And as a matter of fact, during this time, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but the federal government was hesitant, and it was the advocates that were reaching out saying, no, we did truly come up with this plan together, and we would like to try it in Michigan. The only other state that went towards managed care in the early 90s was Arizona. So the two of us did it right around the same time. This is what the structure resulted in, and obviously these are approximate numbers, but you'll see we've got the funding that would come from the Department of Health and Human Services, and Christine developed this visual, and she said so often you would have the state at the top with the money going down, but we're trying to make sure we're reinforcing that our supports are supposed to lift people up. But the state money goes through the PIHPs. In many regions, the PIHPs then contract with multiple CMHs. In some places, it would be 20-some counties. I guess that would be the mid-state PIHP. And then you have service delivery, and then the money goes to the person. Looks a little bit more like this in Oakland County, because as you know, we are both a PIHP and a CMH, so that's just what it looks like here. So our model of the PIHP system has changed significantly through the years. I was still quite young in 1999, I guess you could say. So I wasn't around when that originally happened, and I don't even know how many, but I do definitely know in 2003, that's when we went to 18 PHPs. And most of us remember when there was what they used to call the hub and spoke PHPs, where one of the CMHs would serve as a PHP and for the CMHs in their region. And then I'm sure most of us remember going from 18 to 10 in our state, right? So if you talk to anyone at the state level, those of you who do a lot of work with the association know how hard that was for the other regions. And we were actually quite lucky that it wasn't a huge transformation for us here. But some of the other places, you know, a lot of work, and it's not like everybody joined hands and, you know, we're singing Kumbaya and we're going to be partners, it's going to be great. It was forced partnerships, which has led to some struggles along the way. So we know the PHPs provide all the behavioral health benefits for the folks with intellectual developmental disabilities, severe and persistent mental illness, serious emotional disturbance for children, substance use, and autism services. The Medicaid health plans are indeed supposed to be providing the physical health benefit and the behavioral health benefit for those who are mild to moderate. Now, we've done quite well, and I'm sure everybody remembers when we started making that transition here in Oakland, emphasizing that we needed to have people tap into the services in the community. And I'm trying to remember what the model was. Was it called the recovery model of support, where some people were having to transition to honor, you know, for their services and other community resources? Other PHPs in the state are still using their resources to serve mild to moderate, and they're just starting to plan about how to help people transition. So I remember being in the audience when the public comment in time. It's not an easy transition, but a lot of places across the state with the shrinking dollar are just now tackling that issue. And like I say, we tackled it some time ago. Not that it wasn't very painful for a lot of people. The process of change can be difficult, and many of us were around for that. So this is what the regional map looks like now with the 10 PHPs, and you see we are Region 8, they're in purple. One of the standalones, as they call it, Wayne and Macomb are the other two standalone PHPs. Now, obviously, there's lots of conversations about the health plan and privatization, and this would be what the map looks like for the health plans. So quite different in a lot of different ways. You'll see we are merged in Region 10 on this map with Wayne and Macomb County, and there are 8 health plans that cover our region specifically. But the two maps are not identical if you look at how the PHPs are struggled and the health plan are structured and how the health plans are structured. Some people thought when the changes happened with the health plans that the same would happen for PHPs, but it did not happen that way. So an overlap regarding these two maps, you'll notice that the UP stands alone. So whether you're talking about as the PHP or you're talking as the health plan, the UP has the same regions. So they would be the only one that there would be no changes if somehow there was a decision made to merge these regions. The health plans were based on what they called prosperity zones, doesn't match up with the PHP regions. And other than North Care, which is the UP, there are 4 or more health plans in each of those regions. And as I said, here in our region, there are 8. And that would be the same for Wayne and Macomb. So this graphic comes from the association, and it's trying to show, boy, and it's probably hard to visually make it out, but I think you have it in your handouts, that having 8 health plans in this region complicates things. Right now, while our contractors have 1 payer, so we are the PHP and the CMH, if the funding were to flow through the health plans, they would all have 8 payers. They would have 8 people to contract with, 8 electronic healthcare records, 8, you name it. This comes from the association in an effort to demonstrate the complexity that would be added if that were to happen. The other huge challenge that continues to be a big area of debate, is how to handle the unenrolled population, meaning those people who are not enrolled in a health plan at all. They're called the unenrolled population. It tends to be people that are the highest needs in the state, highest costs in the state, and they have been carved out of health plan participation. They would be folks that you might have heard referred to as dual eligibles. They have Medicare and Medicaid. They would also be folks that are on programs such as Children's Waiver Program. In order to be eligible, you have to have the highest level of need in the state. So part of the problems with these 298 pilots is that that funding, the folks are not connected to a health plan at all, and that funding is 40% of the funding for mental health. So adds the complexity, not only having the fact that in this region there'd be 8 different funders, but then what's going to happen with all those unenrolled people? There's still a lot of debate going on at the state level. Even in those pilot sites that they've been working on now for a year and a half, 2 years, haven't figured out how they're going to handle it yet. This is another graphic that comes out from our association, the CMH Association of Michigan, and it's comparing the PHPs to the Medicaid health plans and refers to the amount of administrative costs. So I didn't do this research, and the sources are noted at the bottom, but overall the PHPs are reported to have 6% in administrative overhead costs, and the health plans are reported to have 15% in administrative costs. So you can see how it compares if the PHPs maintain current structure, what the admin would be compared to, on the right side, what the admin would be if the health plans were to take over. And the note at the bottom is that this results in $200 million less available for services and supports if it were to be transitioned in that way. And again, these are just takeouts and advocacy tools from the association. So we've talked about this in numerous forums, including our recent Tri-County dinner, that we know through the affinity group process, through the 298 work groups, that the people we support have spoken up on this, and overwhelmingly the findings of those report is that, and actually we have members on our board who were on the 298 work group, so you would have heard it all personally. Melkaya, I know you were part of that. That they do not want the shift in public funding to go over to the health companies. So I think this is probably our biggest threat. It has been for some time. And as I talk further in our presentation, it's got impact not only financially, but sustainability of our current structure when we're constantly under threat. So we have made a decision as our administration, our leadership, and our board. We make our priority the wishes of the people we serve. The people we serve have spoken up. When I mentioned those affinity group meetings, we hosted multiple affinity group meetings right here in this county. So we're not even counting on just the state data. People came to tell us specifically their preference is to keep the publicly funded and locally governed PHP structure. So that's the direction we will continue to go. And as we've talked about, healthcare integration happens at the person level, not at the funder level. So we don't think having somebody with good healthcare integration is dependent on the payer being the health plans. We think they're successful models, mostly noting the care coordination model, which we have worked in small scope and we're looking to expand. And we have ways that we are sharing information with the health plans so that there is the integration of the physical and the behavioral health. The Care Bridge is funded through the state, and it's meant to be the tool on the avenue to make sure that we are collaborating and working together. So our advocacy push is to expand the use of the Care Bridge and the models we have to coordinate for the people we serve to have good outcomes without shifting the funding. I think it's probably rather known that one of the fears if the funding were to shift is that all the behavioral health, or not all, but much of it would just get absorbed in the health plans for physical health, and the priorities and the things that mean so much to us, such as peer support, community living, respite for families, will fall off the priority list. I guess that's the fear that we hear from the people we serve and the stakeholders. So we do aim to improve health and lower costs and provide better care, but we think we've got models that can do that without having to do the major disruption of our publicly funded and locally governed system. And again, for us, the goal has never been lower costs necessarily, so it is a change in our verbiage and the way we look at things. We do want to be efficient, but for us, better care and improved health are the top two of this triple aim always for us. So when we look at the different structures, the standalone structures are Wayne County, Oakland, and Macomb. The other 7 regions have multiple counties that fall under them. If you have been involved at all, the other regions, their boards are typically made up of representatives from the CMHs. So when I spoke on the panel during the conference with them, there's lots of challenges to that. If you run a region that has, I'm just going to grab a number, 10 counties that all are under one PHP, and each county has 2 representatives on your board, it's a challenge because everybody's interests, and we know different counties have different priorities, so it's been an ongoing challenge. So the governance and the dual roles, and the other PHPs, some are large, some are small, multiple counties. There's quite a variety across the state, which I think probably leads to some of the criticism we get as a PHP system is the variance. But if we remember when I showed you those graphs, we didn't create the graphs, you know what I mean? We kind of have reacted as a system to state direction, and some of the chaos that ensued was from going to 18 down to 10, and the question can be said, what's the right number? Is it 4, is it 3, is it 1? The debate continues across the state. But as a standalone, typically there's less delegation that occurs when you're a standalone like we are. And generally, standalones have contracted out more of the direct service provision. But as you know, if you've watched, there kind of has been a trend to bring more in-house, whether it is contracting. So this debate between delegation or providing things as a PHP directly is happening all over the state. And, you know, when people are changing business models, I guess it's something we always need to look at. So some of the PHPs delegate everything. Some of the PHPs provide more direct service and don't delegate much. So there is quite a bit of discrepancy. Both is allowable under the PHP contracts, though. So these would be the key functional areas of a PHP, and we ourselves have made changes in some of these areas. If you think about access, used to be a fully delegated function. It was brought in-house. Utilization management used to be fully delegated. It was brought in-house. Credentialing and contracting. So we too have had a lot of these conversations as to what is the best service model going to produce the best outcomes for people we serve. But like I say, across the entire state, PHPs are weighing that very question of what's the right balance of delegation. And I will say, in the past, and I was not in the position I'm in now, I've heard multiple people, CEOs across the state, when there was a lot of discussion of too many layers, begging the state to say, what is the model? If you've got a vision of what the model is, tell us what the model is so that we know what we're aiming for. But there's been a hesitancy on the state to take a position. So I guess it's easy to say too many layers and too much admin if you're not going to come back and say, this is what the golden model is. So we know as a state there's all kinds of models out there, and all of them, I'm sure, have their strengths and have their weaknesses. So some of the environmental factors that are going on, I don't think you'll be surprised to see that we have funding of the mental health service system as the #1 challenge that environmentally. There is also the whole debate about the role of government and publicly governed systems in our safety net for our entire service system. We know some things that were intended for very good, such as the Healthy Michigan program, which I believe we're mostly supportive of. It's been hugely great to have, all those thousands of citizens insured. Had a negative impact on us when it came to the DAB funding transferring. And I think some of these were totally unintended. I don't think people really thought that there'd be this drastic shift, but indeed it happened. It's an environmental factor. And then I think we probably, if you've been around a while, while I think the integrated care focus and healthcare integration is a wonderful focus, and Malkai and I were in DC talking about the 25-year data, probably 10 years ago. You know, it's been talked about a long time, so I know the focus. What I worry about, though, environmentally is if you've been going to the conferences and such, you don't hear topics on person-centered planning, self-determination, employment outcomes, and housing anymore, right? We hear about healthcare integration, contracting with private organizations, how to have the right edge when you're, trying to get a good contract. I don't know, that worries me environmentally, that we are losing our vision for what's most important, losing our passion for talking about people's lives and the impact. So challenges. I guess this kind of sums it up to me. The 298, or my perspective on it, the 298 language, the pilots, the overarching debate, I see it as distractions. I mean, I think we can do good work, we can move forward, but one of the problems we have is while this debate is still out there, having the health plans even willing to sit at the table with us to engage in a way to have good integration when really they see us as a competitor and want to take over our dollars is a huge challenge, right? And maybe even from our perspective, they may say, well, they are on the defensive and they, you know what I mean? So to me, it's a distraction because we're not working together in ways we should for the best impact of those we serve. The challenges regarding funding. And there really has been a lack of transparency. So as Anya reported, we were told there was going to be another geographical rate change in January. And we worked very hard with our providers to make sure we understood the methodology they were using. You may remember there was this issue going on at one time about the number of diagnosis codes that needed to be factored in. We cleaned up our data. We had one provider that wasn't submitting all the diagnosis codes. They were narrowing it down and only submitting one. We fixed that. We were ready for this January change that would have positively impacted the region, and then the announcement came, well, we're not going to implement it in January. This lack of predictability and consistency hurts us as far as planning, right, for sure. But Anya said that the rate structuring meeting we had most recently, and again, we've got a change in leadership at the state, so there was some positive dialogue, and we just hope that these new factors that they use, will be to our benefit. We've got good data here. I'm very confident in our data. But when people are shifting how the data is run or used without any advance notice, we just want to make sure we have the right accurate data. And if we fall on the low end or something is determined to be an important measure and the people we serve don't meet that, it's not like we're saying we need all the money. What we're saying is we would like to be able to have some transparency, be able to explain it, and be able to predict what the funding flow will look like. That's been hard lately. A lot of uncertainty about the budget. And the state's role in doing these factors and setting the funding, they have really delegated it to Milliman. So when I have sat in the rate setting discussions, there's a lot of internal discussions. Does Milliman really understand our models and what we're doing? I feel they're on a learning curve themselves with regard to the work that we do. They've been really clear that our structures and payment models in Michigan are actuarially sound at the state level, meaning the accountant numbers and all that. At the state level, it's actuarially sound. They won't verify that regionally that it is actuarially sound, and that's a problem. That is a problem. I hope Anya's feedback from the last meeting, though, is positive, that we'll be moving into a better direction on that. And to tell you the truth, the problem is we have these swings where PIHPs are winners, other PIHPs are losers. Every time they rerun the formula, and you never really know if you're going to be a winner or a loser. We saw that with the rebasing, and unfortunately, some things that we saw with the rebasing is that some of the winners got so much money so fast that they couldn't spend it. Like they didn't have the infrastructure, they weren't ready to receive the money, and then there was lapsed dollars. And when there's lapsed dollars, what that does is tell legislators and our critics and folks, well, they don't need the money, they're overfunded. When in reality, it was taken from regions that were using it and using it well and sent to regions that they just didn't have the time to prepare. So you guys have heard it a million times. We would always maintain if there are regions that are underfunded, raise their funding to properly fund them without taking from those that are working well. That would be what we would recommend. There's also some changes and challenges coming along regarding federal parity, which of course parity is a very good thing, but parity has shown a spotlight on the PIHP structure with regard to equity of decision making, service array, things like that. So it's basically there's some extent of direction saying across the state PIHPs need to use similar decision making process and offer similar service array, which you would think, oh, that should be easy, but it's been a challenge. If we look at our data, like let's use the service, community living supports. We are a high utilizer of community living supports here in this county because we have really made it a priority to, one, support people in family homes, and two, support people who want an alternative to specialized residential. We have always made those readily available. There would be some CMHs across the state where if you called and asked for community living supports, just as easy as 5 years ago, they would say, we don't do that here. So nonetheless, different regions would say their needs are different, their models are different. So parity across the entire state will be a challenge. And this local characteristics on cost of care, you know, we've all been there. We know when the institutions closed, a lot of the folks from the other regions did not have places to go back, and we, in the whole Tri-County region, took a lot of the people. We would maintain there's a higher acuity of need here. The other rest of the state, I don't know if they would agree with that or not. So there's been some things that have been put in place that were supposed to demonstrate that, such as the supports intensity scale, but yet I've yet to see, all these years doing the support intensity scale, anybody to say, is the acuity higher, lower? I don't know. I've never seen anybody do anything with the data. So that's unfortunate if that is indeed what the intent was. There's unfunded mandates. I don't know how familiar you are with the GAIN. There was a new assessment that was being required for substance use services. It has been pushed back, but if it does get pushed down, it was coming without funding to come with it, and it was going to cost our service system a lot. Anytime we add an extra assessment, it's time, it's teaching, it's training, it's implementation, it's people's lives that now so unfunded mandates, I'll just leave it at that. And the GAIN has been pushed back, but we will probably be getting you more information if that does indeed get rolled out. Data comparisons. Now, this is a problem that, a challenge that is unique to us in a good way, that we are doing values and outcomes-based payment methodologies and the rest of the state. We do not believe there's another PIHP that is. We do know some of the smaller CMHs are starting to do more values-based contracting for employment. And actually, Anya is one of the consultants that sometimes helps. There was some grant money that we're getting so that she could help them develop it. But one of the things we're finding, the state is doing a lot of fee-for-service comparisons, saying, let's say employment, we pay based on the number of hours the person works, regardless of the face-to-face time. So when the state is comparing our data, the nature of our model would be to let supports fade in and out and not to drive face-to-face contact. So I'll just say with the statewide data comparisons, they're not taking into consideration the different outcomes-based models that could impact the way those fee-for-service things are structured. We've seen a lot of changes at the executive branch, the staff at the state, turnovers, vacancies. So there's been a hesitancy to make formal policy decisions and direction and institutional memory. So this whole, I often tie things back to the move from institutions to community and the struggles that our community went through to help people transition. And there's a lot of people at the state who just have never been part of the struggles. And there's always a fear of recreating things when people haven't been around to see the history of our model. Probably one of the number one challenges is our direct support professional shortage. So I don't know what's worse, our funding challenges or the direct support professional shortages. And I guess maybe they're tied together, right? If it is indeed a money issue. So I do want to let you know we are trying to come up with something that we can do. We've been talking about trying to do a pilot and see, is there something that we can do? Because other than acknowledging it's a huge detriment to people. I worry about quality of care in people's personal homes when the workers' turnover is such. So I don't want you to think that we just acknowledge it and aren't trying to take steps. As we work with our provider network, we're trying to see if we could pilot some model that would indeed lead to more longevity of people working with folks. So we don't want to see strangers entering people's house to assist them with bathing. That's nothing any of us would want. And then PHP CEO turnover. So I think I've told you I am the 4th highest seniority CEO. 7 months in, and I already have more seniority than 3 other PIHPs, and there's more coming. So it's that's not good. And our overall workforce recruitment. Even our care coordination team that we had scheduled to do the board presentation for that board meeting that got canceled, one of our team members, we just found out, is been hired to go work at Honor, which we're super happy for her. It was a very nice promotion for her. But we have our staff being recruited by the health plans and everybody else, and the core providers would tell you the exact same thing, that our workforce is being highly recruited by entities that have deeper pockets than we do. And it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. So that's not good, right? That's a lot. But I do want to let you know, with great challenges comes great opportunities. So some of the things we're having to do different when we take a look at our environmental challenges, our funding challenges, and all of these things. So these are some of the areas that you've probably heard dialogue and we're making some movement on with regard to employment. We've definitely had to take a look at, do our contracting methods and our payment methods make sense, and do they promote the outcomes we want to see? So we're really trying to draw a lot of data and say, are our models working? Are indeed people getting employed? Are we doing the things we need to do to fund good outcomes for people? Housing. Now, we have honored all the existing rates for the providers who came on board with us in October for this year. Good news is, because we honored all their historical rates, we can have some really honest conversations with people as we're developing the rates. So we have the providers coming and meeting with us, trying to come up with a model, because related to housing, some of the questions that come up. Are people being served in overly restrictive environments? Have we gone to a model of 24/7 supports with the assumption that if somebody needs assistance, they need to have round-the-clock staff? Have we utilized that too much? Does that result in a lack of privacy, freedom, and opportunities? Do these models contribute to our staffing crisis? Could things like technology? So I want to say the thought is there's a difference between 24/7 staffing, meaning somebody is sitting in your living room while you're sleeping all night long, or access to 24/7 support. I mean, there's so much with technology, everything from red beams, or even you can put something on the bed. If somebody gets up, somebody could be on the phone immediately. Is everything okay? To Alexa, and there's just so many things that we could do. And we're having these very conversations with providers and saying, we have a shortage of staff, people. We are not looking or hoping or thinking, and we would hope that we're going to get abundance more money. So we do need to look at, are there ways we could serve people in a more independent way, but while still keeping them safe? So I don't know. It's an opportunity for dialogue. And then transportation as well. We have fleets and fleets of vans across this county. At day programs, they sit in parking lots. During the evenings and all weekend long, they sit parked. At group homes, they sit in the driveway all day while people are out. So we are starting to have dialogue about how much money did we spend for transportation? Do we have a way that we could use our resources to better maximum impact and outcome for folks with accessible transportation? Don't have it solved. We've got all kinds of ideas, Uber-type models, and we're having conversations with SMART, and we're getting grants to try and focus on, could we come up with some better options for transportation for folks? Because it's not lost on me, almost every presentation we have, transportation comes up as a barrier, almost every time, no matter what the topic is. So, good news and bad news. I shared a lot of bad news, but I do want you to know there is good news. The good news is the people we serve who spoke up during the 298 feed group and the affinity group meetings have said they know there's value in the services and the structure and the such that we provided. Not that there's not always a lot of work that can be done, but a valuable system for valued people continues to be our mission and our goal, and the people we support have acknowledged that there is value in our current systems, and we need to continue to focus on how to have the best outcomes possible for people. The closure of the state institutions, there are only, so I worry that that when people talk about Michigan, people get so caught up on, and I do the same thing, like our satisfaction survey in this county is like 98% satisfaction, and I worry about the 2%, like what's going on with the 2%. But I just want to make sure Michigan is a leader nationally. Like, people look at what we have done in this state. There's only 12 other states in the nation that have closed their institutions, and Michigan is the largest. So when people start to say, oh, our system has to be demolished, it's not working well, I always want to remind people, other states look at us like we are what they would hope to get to someday. And I know we're hard on ourselves, and we should be, because we are not perfect in any way. But the closures of the state institution were huge. The access timelines and engagement without waiting lists, as I told you, other places, and even those places that have gone towards managed care, meaning use the pot of money to serve, like the state of Wisconsin, 90 days for start of service is the goal there and is the measurement for managed care entities. And here, plan within 14 days, start of service within 28 days. So these kind of things, we have made it the way we do business, and other places, are in awe that we can do it. And even when I talk nationally, I'm kind of like, I never really thought about it that way, and they're saying it takes 90 days for them to get it all ready. The early adoption of person-centered planning, which of course that happened in the 90s, I do want to say I've gotten some email and some communication that I think we don't focus on person-centered planning enough. Even I got a former board member sent me an email. It was very long email, very well written though, and it struck with me. And he said, you're focusing so much on people first language, but what does language mean if person-centered planning isn't being done well? And I had to say, oh my gosh, I don't think, he's a gentleman that has spoke well through the years, and when I got his email, it struck me that we need to refocus on person-centered planning, so you will be seeing more along those lines. Community inclusion and social determinants of health. So community inclusion is the term that was used when we're talking about healthcare integration. They use the term social determinants of health, but it really means our services helping people be engaged in integrated communities. And you guys have seen me use this visual before about what our ultimate goal is for people, that they're not separated, they're not in separate programs, separate buildings, or even in their own building in neighborhoods, that we're all elbow to elbow and next door living as citizens in our community. Now, if we look at the data, this comes out from United Cerebral Palsy, and they do measures on how well states are doing. You will see this has the 2011 data, had us number 3 in the nation. 2012 had us number 2 in the nation. They look at where people are living, where people are during the day, employment outcomes, support for families, and they do look at institutions and the number of people census in institutions, things like that. This was the data in 2014. They don't do it every year. Some years they do, or they do it every couple or 3 years. So you see 2014. This was the data, we were number 4 in 2016. On the bottom of this slide, you'll see the analysis shows that both big states and small states have succeeded top 10 success on this community inclusion, and also top performers regarding how much is spent. So it's not a matter of spending more money gets people more community inclusive services. It really is, how are you focusing your planning? What is the culture that you're establishing? Michigan is right in the middle in our spending. So we're not a high spending, we're not a low spending, right in the middle with our service spending. But we have done well at demonstrating, very good community inclusion. So you saw we were at 2, we were at 3, back to 2. In 2016, we were at 4, and then the jump to, this is the report that they just came out with, and we're at 13 in 2019. And the question could be said, why are we shifting? Why are we going lower? And I do think it's the distraction that we talked about earlier. I think we're not having conversations about person-centered planning. We are having so much dialogue about healthcare integration and contracting and establishing ourselves business-wise that we've lost focus on real-life outcomes for real-life people. So we're having a lot of dialogue on that and are going to be refocusing ourselves. I also think, one of the things we should be proud of is that the people we serve do have heightened expectations regarding quality of life. I do maintain, and I have worked I worked for 6 different PIHPs under various contracts before I got this job. And I always suspected it was true. Gosh, how do I say this nice? I don't want to say the folks of Oakland County are more demanding. What they do, though, is they have a higher expectation of what a good quality of life means and what good quality of service provision means. So when compared to the other states, I think that meeting the expectations of folks, and not to say that any expectation is unrealistic, I'm just saying that we hold the bar pretty high here, and we will continue to do that, hold expectations high. So we're doing more with less. There's no more money. Hopefully, this new rate model will have us be one of the winners, but I don't know that we can count on that. I think we would try to maintain what we have and hope that our data will result in more funding. But we should also be proud on self-determination, access, and success. So I know I've talked to you about this is an area I'm going to be focusing on in the upcoming months and year, and that I feel we are shining stars on self-determination with regard to folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but we'll be focusing more on folks with mental health needs and having self-determination as an option for them. Peer support, we are number 2 to Wayne County in the encounters and utilization of peer support, based on numbers and volume, and that would make sense, I think, based on size. So we do a great job with peer support here. We want to continue to increase the role of peers in any way that we can. And the satisfaction results that I already talked about. We've talked about the values-based purchasing. We should be really, really proud of that. And the other coordination that we've done. Honor community health, certainly so many of you have been on the board and know the evolution and how Honor came to be. Was it an easy process? No. Is it a highly successful partnership? Yes. So 60% of the folks that Honor serves, do I have this data right, Kathleen? 60% of the folks that Honor serves are also connected with us. So the collaboration there is producing good outcomes for folks. Regarding substance use, the Medicaid or the medication-assisted treatment, if somebody is in an Oakland County jail, has a substance use need identified, if they are just exiting the jail and they're given a referral, go follow up with mental health or substance use services, there is a 5% success rate with regard to here's the number, call them upon discharge. The work we're doing in the jails and getting people as part of the transition process, treatment in jail so that it continues upon returning citizen and the transition process, we're up to 50%, and we haven't been doing it that long. So although 50% is not the exact number we want to get to, it's certainly better than 5. So I know the work we're doing. And of course, the reduction in opioid deaths in this region compared to other places nationally that have had increases shows we're doing a lot of good work there. We're working with the health plans, and I know you guys have seen various trainings on this sequential intercept model, and some of the aspects of it were talked about right here, right? So whether we're talking about doing crisis intervention training for police, whether we're talking about when people are in the admission and court system, can we divert from jail and other places? And then, of course, discharge planning, and we have people stationed in all these steps to make sure that we're helping people, one, prevent unnecessary restriction, and two, transition back to their community successfully. So this is what it's about, community focus and helping people be part of their community and not just residents of their community. And these real-life quality outcomes that I've been talking to you about since the day I started, and they continue to be our area of focus, helping people live in a home that they own or one that they control, their own front door, being active and contributing members of the community, maintaining friends and relationships, earning income, and being healthy and safe. Because the goal of what we do as a PHP and our funding and our service models is not just to say that people have great services. Our goal would be to help people have a great life. And David DeWitt Taylor loves when I share his photo. He's a DJ, he's available for hire, and he's got a great life. And I think we need to make sure that when we hear people say we have a broken system, we remind them that indeed we have a valuable system for very valued people. And you don't have to look much farther than our advocates and our self-advocates and the people served to see demonstration of the very, very good work that we do. And sometimes it takes just reminding people that we're not perfect. We have a lot of room and a lot of way to go. And like I say, I catch myself being a critic of our system, and I'm trying to make sure I always balance it with these very, very wonderful success stories of people living the lives that they want to live, because that's what it's all about. So that's what I have for you today.
I'm exhausted.
That felt really long. Sorry, guys.
Are there any questions or comments for Annette?
I don't have
would
any
really
spare
urge-
time. I don't have any spare time.
I would urge everybody, hang on to this document. I think it's really good context for what we are attempting to do as we go forward. Sometimes I think that the presentations are always interesting, but we don't always have the right place to put them. And I think that you've provided us with a platform. And I'd say hang on to this, because I think we can refer back to it and measure our changes within our OCHN community. So.
Has there been any feedback or any word from the state as to what, if they have a direction? Because I know the past Linda and company didn't really have much of a vision or direction that they wanted to always share. Are we hearing anything new from the new leadership?
No. What we're hearing about from the state employees, well, we did hear a couple things, and I emailed this to you guys, that they would like to have more of a presence. So they did announce that they would like, and I assume it's coming from the new leadership, but they said they will be starting to attend board meetings, which I think is fantastic. I love that idea. They want to be more involved in monitoring. They talked about revising the audits. So I guess I should say we're aware that changes are coming, but as far as the broad topics, as far as position on 298, still very guarded. And the feedback we get is they're in an information feedback seeking mode. So nothing formal. But like, remember when I talked about how to handle that unenrolled population in the 298 pilots? They have been supposed to release the RFP for that for months now, and they keep saying they're waiting. They don't want to release it until they know the new administration's direction. So that tells me it's not a done deal. There is indeed genuine information seeking, it seems to me. So,
Questions or comments? Thank you. That was a lot to digest. Item on our agenda are the reports from the committees. We'll start with Rights Advisory Committee. Jonathan?
All right, thank you. I've got two meetings that we've had, one in January, and I'll try to cut through this one. On the January meeting, January 3rd, Thursday, at 5:30, let's see, we discussed we had Eddie Brown discussing the budget for our area for recipient rights. It was pretty much very similar to what we'd had in past years. Some of the folks have been transitioned out of the department and over into training, if I have this correct. And we reviewed the policy on protection from harassment and retaliation. So I think that there weren't any suggestions to the changes of that policy. So that was the meeting from the January meeting. The February meeting, let's see, we had Marquita Massey. She's sitting in the back there. Marquita was at our meeting. She discussed, let's see, where is it? The site visit audit. So we talked about, we've talked in the past about, every month I say, well, there were so many site visits we've had, and there's so much left, and that we see them all once a year. So she went in through a discussion to describe what they do on a site meeting, and that they actually have like half a dozen different audits that they do depending on the type of site. So we thought that was pretty interesting. Also, the number of sites went up from 375 last year to 450 this year. So that's just because we've got more network providers. So more sites to visit, more things to do. And then on top of it, you know, the state is required to do an on-site visit for every one of those sites once every 2 years. We're required to do it annually. So we're asking more questions of them and evaluating their environment twice as often with a much more critical eye. So I think that's pretty good. The average audit takes about 4 hours, by the way. So let's see, and then we went through the highlights of the annual meeting, the annual report that we provide in December to the state. So, so every year there's on how many allegations were filed, how many were substantiated. So we had 964 allegations that were filed, 300 were substantiated. This is actually trending down this past year over the prior years. So it's pretty amazing. Like I said, 964 and 300. The year before it was 993 and 312. The year before that it was 1153 and 400. So it is, the numbers are coming down. That means that our folks delivering services to the people we serve are doing a better job at it. It's not that people are acquiescing. They're happier with what the services are, and they're not finding complaint with it. And that there's fundamentally the people that have stuck with us and in our labor force they're part of the mission. So they stayed in there. They're delivering good care. They're just not looking at this as just another job. So I think that's pretty amazing. How do we compare to Detroit, Wayne, and Macomb is always the other question. And let's see, in terms of number of rights allegations to person served, for us it's about 4%. For Detroit, Wayne, about 2%. It's 18% for Macomb. Just to give you a perspective. Significantly bigger, more issues in Macomb County. And then the same thing for recipient rights substantiated a person served. 1% for Oakland, 1% for Detroit, Wayne. These are, again, the substantiated allegations, and 7% for Macomb. So, anyhow, that's about it. We have the next RRAC meeting is in 2 weeks on Thursday, March 7th. I'm actually out of town then. I'm hoping that someone from the board might be able to attend in my place. I've sent an email out asking if someone can do that. So that's it.
Are there any questions for Jonathan? Comments regarding his report? Okay. Next is Citizens Advisory Committee. Lois?
I also have 2 reports, but I'm going to take a very high level in these reports. In December, our meeting, Glenda Videsh, representing Oakland Family Services, was elected as chair of the CAC, and Victoria Peterson, representing the Community Housing Network, was elected to serve as our vice chair. At that meeting, Annette Downey came and spoke to us, and I'm going to move on to the next meeting that was in January. And at that meeting, we had many wonderfully qualified applicants submitted applications to fill the open member-at-large position on the CAC. The applications were reviewed with grateful appreciation for those who applied. Sharon Vellante, representing the Autism Alliance of Michigan, was chosen by the CAC to fill this position. The CAC welcomes her participation and service. At that meeting, Christine Burke came to share with us some information. And our next meeting is tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Citizens Advisory Report? I want to keep saying that so we get it kind of naturally flowing. It's a good thing. Okay, thank you. Obviously, Dr. Klaas is not here this evening, so there will be no report as far as I know from the Oversight Committee. And then to the Director's Report.
My director's report is just handed out, but it's not lost on me that I just spoke with you for a really long time. So I think I'm just going to keep it brief. You know how I love quotes, so the quote I chose for this one is, "The time is always right to do what is right." And I'll just say that with kicking off the new year, I know we didn't have a formal board meeting in January, but it's a time for exciting new opportunities and making renewed commitments. But it's not lost on me that I do get asked frequently, Is the time right to be pushing for systems change? Is the time right to be focusing on things? Some people think with all the challenges and the threats that we just talked about or I just reviewed, it would be our time to just lay low. But I maintain that we need to push forward. We need to hold expectations high. We need to continuously evolve. And I guess when I say that, it's easier to just maintain the status quo. It's easier to do nothing. But we won't do that. Our sense of urgency about innovation and systems change will continue because we feel it produces the best outcomes for people. And if not now, when? And if not us, who? So I believe the time is right to do what is right. We will remain committed to the priorities of the people we serve. And it's not lost on me that despite the fact that at state events, we're not talking about employment, housing, transportation like we used to, our advocates still identify those things along with the direct support professional shortage and privatization threat as our top 5 priorities. So we will remain focused on those priorities. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Downey regarding her report? To the next item, which is other business. I have a couple things. For those of you who weren't able to attend our special board meeting, the RFP process was approved to go forward, and Mr. Rubin and Ms. Kuchar both volunteered to be a part of the RFP review committee it's a part of a larger group, but as representatives of our board. There is going to be a board study session next Thursday, the 28th, from 5 until who knows. And there, in your mail, there is a draft of the agenda, and also you have your updated copy of the board bylaws. But other business? Opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Comments?
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. We did enjoy the ones that you've made up to this point, so thank you. Are there board member comments? Ms. Newman.
I just wanted to let people know why I'm dressed in African garb tonight. I received an invitation. It came through Debbie Wisser. The Friends with Needs, which used to be the North Drop-In Center in Holly, was looking for someone to come in to do a Black History Month presentation. So they reached out to us, and we went and did it today. I had a lot of thoughts. I'm like, Holly is asking for a Black History presentation. That was not lost on me. But it went very, very well. Christine Burke came and attended along with it. It was a very lively discussion. And one of the things I asked them, it was a mixed group. It wasn't all Caucasians there. But one of the things I asked them is Black History Month important? And they said, yes, it is. And I appreciated that. And we did show a video clip of Dr. Martin Luther King. He did an interview, I think, with NBC 11 days before his assassination. And one of the things he told the interviewer is that we were stigmatized for our color. And we didn't just leave it at that. We talked about stigma in all kinds of forms. And I encouraged everybody that attended that meeting, if you've ever been stigmatized for anything, then that should sensitize you to be empathetic with the next person that's stigmatized for any other reason. Because nobody has a right to treat somebody poorly for something that they have no control over. And they were excited. They already put us on the calendar for 2020 to come back and do it again. So that is why I am dressed in Nigerian garb tonight and very proudly wearing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other board member comments? Ms. Schulman?
I've given each of the board members an envelope and asking that you consider making a donation to the CMH PAC. And in the past, we've had 100% participation and like to encourage that going forward. I just want to briefly explain what it is for people listening that might not know. The CMH PAC is a political action committee with CMH overview, which helps support representative and senators in leadership positions and those who champion the funding, legislation, and policy initiatives that help support and improve the provisions of community-based mental health and substance use disorder services. And in our legislature right now, we have a lot of new members, and we have to do a lot of educating and letting them know what's going on and to be advocates in their own right for the people that we serve. Your donations to the CMH PAC help support candidates who are supportive of our efforts in the community mental health system. And I thank you very much for considering to make your donations.
Are there any questions for Lois regarding that? Hearing none. Are there any additional board member comments? Jonathan?
Past years, Patrick's been the one who's collected the checks. Is that?
Either Victoria or Patrick. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Seeing none, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.